Back home to Indiana now, it seems the Hoosier state lags behind others when it comes to the number of women in elected office. Indiana ranks 37th in the nation. So where are the women and why aren't they running? It's a question political science professor Dr. Laura Wilson poses in a piece published this week in the Indiana Capitol Chronicle. She talks with 21 Alive's John Wagner tonight.
This isn't really due to lack of interest or anything like that. What do you attribute this to?
I think most broadly, the pipelines aren't very clear, quite frankly. We do have a lot of programs with the Democrats and the Republicans of the state, even nonprofit organizations, to try to cultivate women candidates. But I think beyond that, your traditional pipelines in terms of the law, in terms of education or government politics in and of itself, they just don't seem as strong in Indiana as we can see in other states. And I could point to Nevada or Colorado. Those are states that have a lot of female representation. And Nevada, actually, they were the first state to have more women in their state legislature than men. So quite frankly, they have an underrepresented population with regards to men in terms of the state house. But you can see some of those pipelines being really strong, women feeling encouraged and supported, feeling confident in their roles, but also being asked, being mentored either by other women or men to consider running for office of any level.
But is there a difference when you get a female leader versus a male leader? Do we, and is that attitude of, I don't care who gets the job as long as they can do it, is that reflected in the polls when the choice is between a man and a woman for an elected office?
Generally, yes, it is. And I think it's actually very smart for voters. You don't necessarily need to pay attention to identity politics. And I'm not saying that if you have a female candidate or male candidate, you should just support the female candidate. What I'm arguing is we don't have enough female candidates, and that's why we don't have enough female leadership in elected office. There is a lot to suggest that for female candidates, they hold themselves to a higher regard, so they're less likely to put their hat in the ring to begin with. But also, to your point, from a voter perspective, there are a lot of different things voters are going to be looking at. And I would emphasize that when a voter is considering candidates, right, you're looking at merit, you're looking at quality, you're looking at how that candidate represents your interest, your experience, right? But you're really looking at the best candidate for the job. And that's not an issue in terms of gender politics. We should just make sure that we have enough high quality, diverse candidates that people are able to make that decision.
2 points that you brought up in your article that I found really fascinating. And you said that typically, generally, when women run, they win. But another part of your article says they're less likely than men to run in the first place. So what goes into those two factors?
The decision factor to run is huge. And there's a lot of great research that shows women are less likely to consider themselves as candidates. Historically, they were less likely to be encouraged as candidates. I'm happy to say that that's changed pretty dramatically, but we're all familiar with that old adage, politics is a man's game, or politics is dirty. You wouldn't want to be involved in that. And that goes to the pipeline comment earlier. If women aren't encouraged, naturally, we're not going to see them think of themselves as candidates in the same way. But I do think what a lot of the research reaffirms is that women don't run at the same rate. It's really important. That's why they don't win. Once you have the same number of female candidates, they have every bit as great as likelihood as a male candidate to win. So it's not a problem in terms of actually winning. Right? That's where it's null. It doesn't matter anymore. But the problem is getting the female candidates. And by and large, for women to consider themselves in this role, to compare themselves to actual versus ideal candidates, to oftentimes be told and recommended and encouraged by other people. There's research that suggests women need to be told more often than men, hey, have you thought of? Hey, would you consider? Hey, what about running for XYZ?
That's something I was going to bring up too. In your article, you mentioned several organizations from the Girl Scouts all the way up to the Luger series and Women Forward. Tell us about those organizations, what they do, and how they try to at least illuminate that pathway from everyday citizen to an elected position.
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked this because I'm hoping someone is watching this and all of a sudden thinking, hey, maybe I would be interested in running. So these are different organizations, as you said, Girl Scouts. The Democrats at the state level have Hoosier Women Forward. The Republicans have the Luger series, but they're really focused on cultivating female leadership. specifically to the political parties, they're focused on prospective female candidates, either people who have run before or who are interested in running in the future, and obviously align with that party or ideology. For some of the nonprofit organizations, they're really just trying to encourage people to think of themselves as a leader, in part to give them the confidence, but also help them develop the skill set, help them build the network, and reconsider, or maybe for the first time, consider what it would be like to serve in public office. And for me, these kind of experiences are invaluable because your individual lived experience, maybe you were never told, hey, you should run or serve in this kind of capacity. But in addition to that skill set, we talk about that network. You're surrounded with other people who share the same interests as you do, who want to have a better community, who are interested in using their talents and their passions and applying it to public service. So it creates somewhat of a camaraderie. And I think it can oftentimes really help propel prospective candidacies from folks considering it, maybe having thought about it once or twice, and then going through one of these programs, building the skill set, right? But also developing the network and the confidence to leaving, saying not just I want to or I think I might, but I will run for office.
Dr. Laura Wilson, I thought this was such a fascinating article on the Indiana Capitol Chronicle website. If you want more information about any of the groups we talked about, any way that they can help you, or if you just want to take a look at these numbers, I think they're really fascinating about who is and isn't running for elected office. Head to the Indiana Capitol Chronicle website. And Dr. Laura Wilson, thank you so much for being with us again on 21 Alive News.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.